everybody. Just as a quick introduction, I'm Max. I'm the Senior Director for AI Strategy here at ABBYY. And over the last couple of weeks, I've been fortunate enough to be able to travel around the world a little bit, actually talking about this particular topic with several of our customers and partners. And it's been really exciting to get all of their feedback as to how, definitely I would say the hype cycle, but not just that, just the technology is evolving really quickly. And I wanted to share today with you some insights from all of those conversations, what we are seeing in the market, and definitely how we as a company are looking to evolve our technology continuously in the forefront of all of that. So, but before we go and look at the future, I want to go back just really quickly and look at how we actually got to where we are today. If you look at some historical moments in technology and how that worked, you can see that continuously the steps, or at least the space at which technology has continued to evolve, has been incredibly, steadily increasing actually. For example, when I was researching this and trying to figure out, okay, how did we get here? I learned that the first battery was actually already invented in the 1800s. I had no idea. And then same when 16 megabytes of RAM was still a big deal, right? I remember those days. That was quite impressive. Only a few years later, you actually had thousands of songs in your pocket with the iPod, which had several gigabytes available. At the same time, there's also another event that actually took place that, for me, kind of introduced or started the whole, I would say, series of events that led to where we are now. There's two things. One is, in 2006, NVIDIA actually launched their CUDA platform. So that was general purpose usage of GPUs, meaning they could do other things than just graphics and gaming and those kind of things. So that actually is what started this entire cycle of power, resources, capabilities that allowed us to get where we are today when it comes to AI. At the same time, in 2007, we've got the iPhone that got released, or just smartphones in general. This really introduced a new wave in how people perceive technology. So this was definitely a shift that happened. Back then, before that, everything was enterprise grade. Even our FlexiCapture product was enterprise grade. And it was difficult to manage. That was what enterprise technology was. But because people suddenly had their hands on technology that was easy to use, great to look at, and very different, they had the same kind of expectation in the enterprise space. When they went to work, they wanted to have that same kind of capability. So that's when the whole motion of low-code, no-code happened. And we've seen that progress to a stage where everything is now, every single piece of technology is entirely low-code, no-code. And then, of course, last but certainly not least, we've got 2022 and we've got ChatGPT that was released. And that has, for me, in my opinion, created another technological shift that's now happening as to how we interact with technology, how we look at it. And the great thing is, both the great thing and also the difficulty with it, is that everybody, just like the iPhone, has gotten their hand on it. Everybody's tested it, everybody's played with it, and everybody has their opinion and also what they think or they perceive as knowledge about the technology. So that led me to an interesting question, right? This technology, all of these events, and a lot of things that have already happened in the past, it continues to accelerate. But where did we actually start when it comes to machine learning? When did it actually start? So I have a question for you, the audience today. When do you think the first machine learning model was invented? Would anybody dare to wager a guess?
1984.
Sorry?
1984.
1984. The first recurring neural network was invented in 1925. So not too far off, but still a long way before. And we've continuously improved on that. And for example, first computer vision, OCR, was 1974. The first convolutional network, still the most popular used framework today for all of the AI-driven things that we use in our daily lives. That's that from the 1980s. It's just become more powerful. At the same time, there's two events that really led to, again, where we are today when it comes to artificial intelligence. One is the Transformer, 1992. The Transformer is the framework that is being used for ChatGPT, for all large language models. That's what it stands for, Generative Pre-trained Transformers. So back then, these things weren't as smart as they are today. That changed in 2017. when Ashish Vaswani actually wrote a paper, and he worked for Google, talking about attention is all you need. What does that mean? Well, before, all of these technologies could only take as much input, and they could only take input in series. Now, the difference that happened here in 2017 was that it could take in context, it could take input in parallel, and that's a huge difference. That also led to the first large language model, which we could consider the very first large language model, to be released in 2018. Anybody want to guess which one that was? That was ChatGPT-1 in 2018. Anybody hear about that back then? So if you look at it, objectively, it took us 100 years to get from the first battery to having lights in every single house. It took us another 100 years to go from the World Wide Web to everybody basically having a computer in their house. And then we start to accelerate. 6 years between those 60 megabytes of RAM, which what today holds 2 MP3s or MP4s, to thousands of songs in your pocket. And 4 years from the very first GPT-1 that nobody heard or cared about to GPT-4, 3.5, that is blowing up all over the place. You can definitely see the acceleration of how fast technology is moving. And for me, especially that last one, it also explains the hype cycle that's currently happening. If you think about it, definitely the release of GPT-3 was a technology trigger. There's no denying it. But we are still, although I've started to think about moving it down just a little bit, not too much, we're still at the very high peak of inflated expectations, right? Everybody is still there. It's going to do amazing things, don't get me wrong, but only when we get here. And that's some of the reality that I'd like to share with you today about what is this going to look like. When we go past all of these inflated expectations, we hope to avoid the froth of disillusionment, and we just kind of go through these 2 steps when it comes to generative AI specifically. Hopefully, we will see really great things that are going to happen. And for me, again, the main thing is the shift in how we communicate, how we work, how we operate with technology. So why is that important? Well, like I said, there's so many different levels of expectations currently that are happening. And customers are telling me, oh, we have to do something with generative AI, or we have to start leveraging within the company if we want to stay at the forefront. The thing is, there's also this perception that artificial intelligence, and even more specifically generative AI, which is a singular solution, right? It is an umbrella term, but it's very specific, is going to solve all the world's business problems. It's not. No matter which way you twist or turn it, if you want to solve real world problems, then you have to have the combination of the right techniques and technologies combined together so that you can actually get the outcomes, the actual results that you're looking for. And of course, at ABBYY, we specialize in one of those things because we know that in every single business process, 90% of them, we have data that's locked away inside of documents. And guess what? If you want to even start thinking about leveraging generative AI, then you actually have to have all of your data available. We heard it already tomorrow from both KPMG and from Novellus. We need to unlock that. We need to have all of this data made available. Funny story. Yesterday when I was flying over to Munich from Belgium, I was sitting in the lounge and a guy came to sit next to me. My flight was late, so I had a bit of extra time. And we started talking. And he actually turned out to be somebody that specializes in privacy and data security. He helped write the GDPR law. And he told me, Max, it's incredible how all of these companies are jumping towards generative AI without going through the proper steps of having data privacy, data security, or even just realizing that they don't even have the data to make the entire thing contextual, to help it understand your business, to have a knowledge base that you can use in combination with it, meaning that you can actually limit the bad thing, the hallucinations that these difficult technologies actually come with. And that was really important. It was great to hear that from somebody else as well. So there's this really simple concept called context detection, right? So what that means is you have your large language model. This could be anything, really. And you want to actually ask it a question about your business. If I go to ChatGPT, if I go to Llama and ask it about ABBYY, it will give me an answer about ABBYY. But it can only give me general knowledge. What you want it to do is actually take the information from your business, combine that with the question you're asking, and give you an answer that is confined and contextualized to the result that you're actually looking for. But of course, like I just said, most companies don't even have that part yet. They're jumping to the end finish line without actually going through the right steps. And that's why, it is definitely our position as a company that you need to have accurate models, you have an accurate knowledge base. You need to have all of that data filled out. You need to have it structured so that all of that data locked away inside of those documents becomes available for the proper purpose, the proper usage in combination with private field. But there's definitely a but. Like I said, for me, the next shift that we're currently seeing, the next thing that's happening, is when after we've moved past the entire generative AI feeding frenzy, all of the hype, we will get to a point that we will start working with technology, with computers, with the applications that we work with today entirely differently. You can already see that in what a lot of companies, for example, Microsoft and others have released as co-pilots. You're going to have somebody to talk to. They got you through the process of working with the technology that you're working with. And that's a massive shift. Just like low-code, no-code opened up a lot of complex technologies to a wider group of people. We suddenly had COEs with a mix of business and IT people, and people that were not purely business, not purely IT, not programmers either, but somehow they could work with all these technologies. We're going to see that again. This is currently the thing that's happening. We're going to get to a point that very complex technology, like intelligent document processing and others, are going to become available to yet another new group of people, a big group of people. And that, for me, is the good outcome, the great thing that we're going to see from generative AI. But, just another but, there's a few steps that we have to go through to get there. One of them is definitely when we look at legislation. So I recently wrote an article about the fact that I've never seen government move as fast as they are when it comes to artificial intelligence. The EU AI Act has already been coming into effect. They wrote it in just a few months, and they got it voted in even less. It actually made me think they were using generative AI to write all the text because it was so fast, blazing fast. But to give you a bit of insight, just to know what's to come, and also to understand what you're going to have in terms of responsibilities as companies to your customers, to the government. It's important to know there's many different nuances within both the legislation, but also just the general AI. Now, if you look at it, there's really two different kinds of artificial intelligence. The first one is narrow intelligence, artificial narrow intelligence. That means it can do a task that you and I can do, but it can do it better, it can do it faster, but it can only do the one task. For example, that's IDP. We can all extract data from documents. Vantage can just do it better and faster than we can. Same with process intelligence. We can figure out a process. We can do it the old school way with the post-it notes and everything else that comes with it. But process intelligence can do it better and faster. The thing here that is getting under a lot of scrutiny is definitely that when we look at general intelligence. And these are machines that can be made to think and function just like you and I. And that's where, all the horror stories, maybe not so much horror, depends on who you ask. If you're a sci-fi fan, this looks great. We're going to have Terminators finally. If you're on the other end of the spectrum and you get scared by self-driving cars, well, that's not going to go well for you. But don't worry. Like I said, the government legislation is already thinking about making sure that we don't see too much of science fiction coming to reality. And when I talk about science fiction, I'm talking about the downsides of what science fiction has already predicted. Now, there's a classification of different AI systems. And I'm going to walk you through some of them to give you an idea of what they are and how they are applied, to also show you the pitfalls when you start working with these technologies. What are the things that you have to keep in mind? So let's start with minimal risk, or actually no risk. So this is absolutely permitted without any restrictions, but falls into this category, narrow AI. So anything that is narrow AI, There's no risk involved, and there's also very little obligations in terms of transparency that you have to provide. Of course, you have to show that you're actually within that category, but that's about it. Now, when we get to AI with specific transparency obligations, that is when we get to impersonations, for example. I'll give you an example that I just found last week of what that could look like. But again, it's permitted. Just like, for example, I have a tool on my computer that allows me to generate my voice. It's not me. I just type up what it has to say, and it sounds exactly like me, and it even fools myself. So it's that good. But that's permitted because we're also being transparent that we use that technology. When we get to the high risk, that's when we really start to get into the influence that's going to happen into somebody's life. So that is, for example, recruitment, automatic decision based on a generative AI engine, an LLM, looking at resumes without any kind of human intervention and discarding the ones that it doesn't think is right. You can do it, but you're going to have a lot of conformity and a lot of requirements to explain how and why. When we get to the last stage, which is absolutely unacceptable risk and is completely prohibited, that's, for example, social scoring. And for those of you that want to get an idea about those two categories, recently somebody did some research and actually created an LLM that can impersonate Ludwig von Beethoven. You can talk to him. He's alive again. This is impersonation. This is high risk because this is absolutely real. It's going to learn from data that's publicly available. So impersonation, identity theft, all of that comes to mind. It's super easy these days. Because if you can turn this into something that can answer questions about your life, whoever is trying to scam you doesn't have to know everything or get the right answer. It can just have the voice generator at the end and can talk to your bank. It can impersonate something. These are risks that are out there. And then the last one, social scoring. If anybody watched the TV show Black Mirror, the nosedive episode, that's exactly what it is. Unless you are a nice person, according to the artificial intelligence, you're not going to get into cafes anymore. You're not going to be able to take a flight, or at least not the one that you want. You will have to get and go and sit at the end of the bus, just like everybody else would. These are the things that the government legislation is trying to avoid, to make sure that this does not happen. And I think that's a very good thing. Again, the thought of disillusionment, only if we were to have all of this, it would take us a very long time to actually get through it. Now, you're probably wondering, well, where are we with all of these different capabilities, all of these different models that are out on the market that provide a foundation, and how are they doing when it comes to transparency? Well, the Stanford actually created a foundation that looks at only this. You've got the link down there if you want to go look at this. They're updating it continuously. And as you can see, the top score, 54%. So they're looking at different metrics. They're looking at transparency in terms of which data they use for training, transparency in post-processing, transparency in energy consumption, and everything else. So the best one that we've got at the moment is Llama. And the one that's most popular is GPT-4, which actually scores below 50% in terms of transparency and actually being ready to be used for production use cases without any of the downsides of the infringements on AI legislation. It's somewhat scary, right? Because this is definitely a pitfall that we have to make sure that we can try to prevent. Because this is going into the direction of a lot of other technologies that we've seen before that will not live up to the hype and actually go through, again, downside. Now, there's an important thing, and I get asked this question a lot, is, okay, this is great, and we understand the risks, we understand the downside. We also see the upside. We also see the amazing things we can do. So how is ABBYY responding to that specific? Well, let me explain to you how our artificial intelligence works and how that is already conforming to any kind of legislation, and that it's leveraging the techniques, the basics of these generative AI models in a way that actually makes it work. And that's the important thing. So, for example, 4 years ago, so that's right around the time when GPT-1 was introduced. Again, nobody cared, nobody heard. We were already using large language models in our OCR process. So this is what our OCR pipeline looks like. If you put it under a microscope, we go from that image on the left to the output on the right through different steps. We have our convolutional network again, 1990s, which is really performant in segmenting an image. What does that mean? We're going to rasterize everything. We're going to look at the different bits and pieces of the image that actually make up the characters that we're trying to analyze. We'll take that output and we'll only get the bits and pieces of the image that we want. We'll put that through a specific transformer that is going to take that input and output that in a bunch of words, a bunch of characters, a bunch of letters. And it's going to do all of that in context. So right now we've just got the word November, but it can also do that in context of the field of the document and everything else that's there, which will then be sent to the LLM, and our LLM, yes, our LLM that we trained ourselves, our data entirely transparently, is trained on 15 million parameters. 50 million? That sounds low. No, it's not low, it's fit for purpose. Because if you compare that to, for example, 15 billion to typical LLMs, which is great, but it gets you exactly the same result, except for the power consumption, and we tested it, would be 10x. So if we were to take GPT 3.5 to do this task, which it can, it would cost us 10 times more in energy. And there's no point, because it only goes up 1 or 2 percentages in some use cases that we will get a better outcome in terms of what we have. And that's what I meant with making sure that artificial intelligence that you apply to your business, to your enterprise, to your processes is purposeful and not just taking technology for the sake of using technology. So again, a lot of people are surprised when I tell them that we've had LLMs for already more than 4 years. Now, similar approaches, again, we use every single day, you use every single day when working with Vantage when it comes to extracting information from documents. The same principle applies. We take and segment the entire document. We get all of its features, we get all of the words, and then we start to look at all of that data and transform it into the information that we're looking for. Whether that's the date, the invoice number, whether it's that really complex line item structures, where you've got descriptions with actually numbers in it, all of that is absolutely possible. But again, it's been created and modified and optimized for the specific task at hand. That's the important. It's also for that reason that we actually made a combination of different technologies. So throughout the entire out-of-the-box capabilities of Vantage, we've got the OCR, we've got our deep machine learning. So with deep machine learning, like you just saw, we're training it on specific document types. That will give you very high accuracy fields. So with our out-of-the-box skills, you can easily get 90% accuracy or even more in some cases. But then, instead of having to wait until you get thousands, 10,000, 30,000 documents to further uptrain a deep learning model, we've got our fast machine learning, which will help memorize exactly the things that it actually needs to memorize, only the fields that you're missing from the main model. And all of that through reinforcement learning. The reinforcement learning, again, that you can see the efficiency gains of incredibly quickly. And that makes a huge difference. I was talking to, I'll tell you that story in a bit. I've got a great English to go with that. But anyway, I'll get back to that because this is important. This is something that a lot of people overlook at the moment when it comes to reinforcement learning, but that is a key essential part, especially when you're talking about intelligent document processing. So all of those combined get us to the point that you will see your outcome, your results of 95% plus incredibly quickly, because that is the absolute essence and that is the basic pipeline that you're going to need when it comes to document processing. But like I said, there's so much great technology out there in the market, also in the open source community, and it's evolving at such a rapid pace. But we're actively working with that community. So whenever you see all these capabilities that I've already talked about at Vantage, those are coming both from the open source community that we look at. For example, we're looking at Palm, we're looking at Llama, and we're looking at how these are built so that we can learn from the best of it and optimize it into our product. And at the same time, we're also building our own proprietary capabilities, like the LLM that I talked about, that is entirely proprietary with its own architecture. But the most important bit is we take all of that research and we turn it into commercially viable products, commercially viable products and allow you to make your business case. Because that's what we're all here for. We want the proven outcomes. We want to know that the artificial intelligence, the technology that we're getting is actually going to help us in solving our business problems, solving our business cases, and reaching that maturity as an organization that we want to have. So everything that we own in terms of technology, we optimize for inference, resources, and costs. And that's absolutely essential because actually what I'm going to talk to you about in just a bit is that the market is starting to realize, the world is starting to realize that that is still important, no matter how good the results might be, how much wow factor there is when it comes to Gen AI. There's that bit of pieces that we actually have to take into account. And we share that back. So everything that we do with that technology that we get from the open source community and that we optimize, that we change, that we make better for those specific purposes, we share back into our UML library. It's a library of machine learning frameworks that's available on GitHub and other open source communities. So that's a continuous cycle. People use it, they like it, they further improve it. We actually take those improvements back into account. That gets back into the product, which is a really great cycle in terms of all the capabilities that we have. Now, we've already talked about two things. OCR, ICR, I talked to you about the different steps here. Also about extraction, we also talked about that a little bit. But again, one of the main questions that I'm getting to a lot today is, Max, why would we need you guys if we have GPT, if we have Llama, if we have whatever, to actually use an LLM for intelligent document processing? Well, this is the answer that I give them. It doesn't take a single thing to be able to complete the task. It takes cutting-edge AI at every step of the way to be able to deal with the real-life usage scenarios when it comes to processing documents in businesses, and just documents everywhere. And I've got a great quote at the end that will prove that point. So this is all the things that Vantage and all of our other IDP products do, going from image enhancement, meaning that we will optimize, create and take care of the distortions, and then we also are good at object detection. So that's image segmentation, that's what it's called, finding out exactly what is on the document before we even go to the OCR step. Still, we've got the most languages out there, and all of these different facets of classification, extraction from any type of document, whether it's structured, semi-structured, unstructured, are all capabilities that we have within our pipeline. At the same time, all of these things, we heard it this morning from KPMG, all these complex technologies that you see down below, reverted-based language model, BiLSTMs, convolutional neural networks, image semantic segmentation, global net, all of these complex technologies that are typically in the hands of data scientists or programmers is accessible to everybody. They even said it. And that's what makes a difference. You're not playing, so all of these things are things that we base it on, but we then make sure that it's optimized, and that makes a huge difference. Now, as you can see, it's a huge set of capabilities, and this is also why I said this is my answer to what anybody asks me. Well, can we just use generative AI to do IDP? No, there's just no way. And it's also not built for that. But if you use it in the right way, we're definitely moving to a place where we will actually see, for example, Vantage giving you the interface to talk to it and actually doing the translation of the technical information that it needs to understand and that you can just have a conversation with. You can feed a document, it will show you all the fields it can recognize. You just have to say, these are the ones I want, these are the ones I don't want, and I want to build this kind of process. So the entire pipeline, including integrations, will be set up for you. That's what we're moving towards. That's what we see as that plateau of productivity to further ensure that the amount of time that you spend setting something up goes down, so the amount of time that it takes to get to the ROI that you're looking for actually makes perfect sense. So that's why whenever I talk about this particular topic with customers, I like to explain it to them visually. I tell them, look, you have silos of data today, right? You need to get insight into that. You need to use it. You've got silos of documents that you don't have all the information from. And you need to be able to get all of that out there before you go to that finish line, the cherry on top, put the flag at the top of the building for the last 15 meters to be the highest building in the world. That's Gen AI. You want to get there through using our AI foundation with Vantage and with Timeline to ensure that you get insights into all of that before you even start trying to get to the finish line, at least what currently is the finish line, and start leveraging generative AI. Now, that's a great story. At least I think it's a great story, and I used to be the only one telling it. But this is interesting. Now it gets really fun, because I want to share with you some latest market insights. So first off, I think it's about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Time's flying, and you're having fun. People starting to realize, where is all this money going? What's happening? We're using these tools. We're using generative AI. We're using Microsoft. We're using GPT. What is actually going on? Well, we did some measurements. If we start looking at it and you try to process documents, which, by the way, GPT still has a lot of limitations, only 50 pages, etc., it's bloody expensive. It's incredibly expensive. And also the way that their mechanism for pricing works is not very transparent when it comes to our type of processes. What do people count when they're working with documents? Pages, because that's what they are. How do they work? Tokens. What is a token? Well, it's a certain amount of computational resources. How long does it take to process a document? We'll let you know afterwards once we're done. That's their answer. If you look at the other side, we talked about OpenAI, they're owned by the same company. Microsoft, they have their own IDP capabilities. If you take a document that they do not have out of the box, pre-trained model, and you train it on yourself in their platform, which is possible, and then you actually want to not just talk to APIs, you want to build an integration, you want to use Power Automate. So 3 times more expensive than ABBYY with Vantage for the exact same capabilities. And again, it's not just us saying that anymore. It's basically everybody at this point. So the Wall Street Journal, and this is the blog from Paul Turo, they found out that basically for GitHub Copilot, which is the very first Copilot that was launched in production, that is used by a lot of people, which I think is really great because it's helping us build capabilities a lot faster. At the same time, GitHub is losing an average of $20 per user every single month because the technology behind it, although albeit great as it is, it's incredibly cost efficient. And there's another component that people are starting to realize. When it comes to the ecological footprint of these technologies, well, there was another comparison coming from the Wall Street Journal in this case. And he looked at the queries that it takes to actually power all of our Google searches that we do every day, right? I mean, if you haven't done a Google search at least once a day, then you probably haven't touched your phone. What that takes up is about 0.3 watt hours. What is 0.3 watt hours? Well, it's about the amount of energy that it takes to warm up about a teaspoon of water, right? So that paints a picture. Now, each query to ChatGPT takes 10 times that, which is already significant. That's warming up an entire bottle of water. And the thing is, Google is thinking about actually releasing their new type of capability when it comes to search, which will be much more intuitive, which will be much more interesting, much more in-depth, because it will give you answers instead of just pages from an index. But the power consumption would be the equivalent of the entire energy consumption of the nation of Ireland for a year if they were to flip that switch and actually turn it on. So the footprint of these technologies is incredibly big. And that's why now the consensus is starting to form around the fact, hey, we actually going to need smaller models that are efficient at the specific task that we're looking for. It's what we do. So I'm really happy this is happening in the market that people are starting to realize, because that's what I've been trying to tell them. This is great, and it will have its purpose, it will have its function. Nonetheless, for a specific task within the business, you're going to need specific models that are going to be able to help you with that. And people agree that it's going to be key, instead of using the same technology for everything, which is very power hungry, we'll be able to offset that and use it in the right way, the right purposes, for actually taking smaller models and actually offset that energy requirement. The Wall Street Journal put it in a very interesting way, quite amusing actually, but so true. Using generative AI to summarize your email is like using a Lamborghini to deliver a pizza. It's really fun, it's pretty magical, At the same time, it's not very cost efficient and not really great for the environment as well. And that kind of sums it up. I mean, the fact that this is becoming the realization that it's happening, and people are getting over that hype cycle. They're starting to go and actually fall into that pit of realization. Well, this is not everything that we hope to do. There's several shortcuts that we're trying to make. That is what we want to also help you, our partners, and our customers to make sure that you're successful in your projects, that you can use AI for sure, because it will help you get to a better point in your organization, but in the right way with the right purpose. And I said I had a story to tell you because reality really is starting to sink into a lot of organizations when it comes to this. I had a group of data scientists talk to me about 6 months ago, and they said, we're going to build our own IDP capability. It's going to be amazing. We've already done testing. We've built it in the lab. We get great results. And I asked them a couple of questions. I said, well, for starters, how many documents do you need from your business to actually get started and think about going to production? Because they were doing some testing right now. They said, we need 30,000 documents. Wow, that's a lot. You're going to label them? Yeah, it's going to be great. It's going to be easy. Okay, good, sure. I also asked, how is that going to work when you take it out of the lab and actually get new documents that it hasn't seen before, or new kind of processes that it has to adhere to, compliance? Oh, we're going to take care of all of that. It's going to figure it out. It's going to be great. A couple of months later, I talked to him again and asked him, so how's it going? Well, it's an absolute pain to maintain it. We have to do reinforcement learning manually because we don't have the human loop factor yet. And documents that we trained on were not the ones that actually are now coming in. We're starting to get documents that are coming in from scans. People's cats are in, their copy states are on it. We're getting more mugs than actual documents that we need because we have no control over the input. Like, well, really? You have no control over that? That's interesting. If you only had a full end-to-end IDP pipeline that takes care of all of that, right? That'd be great. So that is their current state at this moment. And we've seen this already with a couple of customers. Even so much to the point that one of our customers, H&R Block, who initially went with Microsoft and was going to use their IDP capability point solution, came back to us after a couple of months and said they can't even do in a production state at scale, at volume forms, simple forms, tax forms. They couldn't do it because the reality of working with documents is so different from what you can do in a laboratory. Again, not just me saying it anymore. Stanford University and Google, they said, well, we've seen great things from generative AI. We've seen great things from LLMs when it comes to processing documents. But the metrics, the benchmarks that we've been using do not reflect the real world when it comes to processing documents. And guess what? ABBYY's been doing for more than 30 years. We've been through it. We've seen more than 30 years, all of the nasty documents, all the different variations, all the different possibilities of how a TIFF file come in. We've still seen faxes coming in, actually even more faxes than the year before. We know how to deal with the mobile input. We know that people are taking pictures. We're actually giving you tools to control how those documents come in. All of it, the combination is important to be able to leverage artificial intelligence in a way that's purposeful, that's fit for purpose. And that's why, I always love to end on the fact that, look, we've already been around for a couple of years, and these new starters in the business when it comes to IDP love to say that we're old school, but we're the true AI first because we can combine our innovation that we've been continuously doing with our experience, and that is the important thing when it comes to actually having a solution that will give you proven business outcomes. So that's a primer for a discussion I'm going to have later with Fabian when it comes to our PA is dead. And also to share with you insights into where the market is currently, how we are viewing it, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you. Obviously, there's some questions, so if anybody has any, feel free to shoot. I don't have gummy bear survey, so. I don't think that I'm smart enough. Last question, but maybe somebody, yeah.
I have a question on the hype cycle. Just so what is your thinking in terms of we are now at the peak of the hype cycle? We are like you will a little bit down, so you will be going through this every time you are in a new company. You're introducing AI, you're introducing AI technologies, also like Vantage, FlexiCapture, whatever you're bringing that just has a slight AI tag falls on the curve. So what do you think will the distribution of this technology so that everybody has their hands on it, everybody knows it? Will it shorten the hype cycle so to be faster in the state of production, or will it prolong basically the time it takes us to actually get productive, because use cases and whatsoever are just like distorting the real picture?
No, it's a really great question. So I definitely think that we're in the state of inflated expectations for any longer than we should have been, because so many companies have simply jumped on what actually Gartner calls consuming these Gen AI capabilities. What does that mean? They've just taken an API from Microsoft, Azure, from Amazon, from OpenAI, and they plugged it in, and they're just consuming it as is, right? And then they're starting to tout about it and shout about it to everybody, saying, well, look, we've got this. And then when they actually start looking beyond it, you see, well, there's no real practical value. You can talk to a document, that's great, but what does that actually serve as a purpose? So I think there's that, which has kind of kept us on the expectation loop a little bit longer. Now that, again, similar to how ChatGPT got into mainstream media, it got into everybody's hands. Now, like you saw, most of my references were not from obscure papers somewhere on the arXiv. It was coming from the Wall Street Journal. It was coming from other really mainstream media sources. So I think it's more going to be about the awareness that is now being created about the pitfalls that we might see, that people will know about, that will actually start to shorten that level that you're asking about and getting us to that plateau of productivity. But I do believe that it's going to be continuously important for you, for me, for vendors and also partners within technology, working with customers to continuously educate them to not just look at the face value or LinkedIn posters that try one document and say Gen AI has already blown IDP out of the water. There is that kind of confusion being created because it's also a way for them to continuously get their own hype. And I think everybody's using that. It's a marketing tactic. Nonetheless, I think if you bring it down to the level that you're always talking about, that productivity level, that's important. I think that is where companies like us can create value for customers and not just jump on board every next hype cycle that we're seeing. I don't know if you would agree or not.
I think I'm thinking about it a lot, because the question is then when especially what we see at clients, the center of excellence having an AI technology in their backpack and showing it, and then you're immediately on the peak. And then as you say, you as the implementer and also the business is searching for this new, did it work out? Did it not work out? What did we achieve now?
Yeah.
And then I think the downfall that we have is even a little bit deeper than in the end. And I think it will also be for ChatGPT and everything, because as you said, it's 48% of transparency what has happened, so 52% still to be discovered, not knowing if there's a use case. But I think in the end, then maybe going through all of this, having everybody have the hands on it will make the understanding broader. So maybe the plateau of productivity then in the end is higher. So that this hype cycle is longer hype, deeper fall, but higher productivity.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I would agree with that too. Yeah, sure. Any other questions?
Maybe a comment from my side. I remember when I joined ABBYY company.
Like forever ago.
Yeah. It was 2006, so it was 17 years.
Congratulations, sir.
Thank you very much. So I remember at that time, people were talking to me, what your company is doing. And at that time I said, we're dealing with paper documents that you like them or something. So, you know what? It seems that paper documents will disappear in the next couple of years. So we are 17 years after this, we see that demand for processing paper or image-based documents even increasing. And people's expectation from technology is much higher than that time, because that time I remember, more of the things that we can do is some phone processing. really some structured stuff. So it is great to see that like when you show all the stack of different technologies, the company is investing and placing AI inside of every of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Further advance it and you know, like you said, also what we're seeing in our metrics, somehow fax is back on the rise. And I remember when I started actually my first job, people were saying the same thing. Paper's going to go away in 3 to 4 years. Still around. So yeah, it's you know, it's been great to see how ABBYY's been able to continuously evolve and stay at the forefront, be the market leader of all of this. And again, what you just said is, but people's still around. And like Google and Stanford University talked about, their benchmarks are for the digital world, purely digital world, but that's not the reality. So that's important. That is important. And actually, Daniel, yesterday we were talking to, was it the day before? It was on Monday. We were talking to a customer of ours, and we had I'm going to call him a hardcore fanboy at this point of Gen AI. And they asked me the question, so, you know, we have the same pipeline as you do, and it's exactly the same. Well, what makes it different? Well, why are you still better, even if we do the exact and apply the exact same methodology? Well, it's this one, right? And they had to admit, yes, actually, if you're thinking about how these things work, training, which is exactly that. Training equals experience. You're giving your experience to this model, and they only had a short amount of experience to give it, where we've had more than 30 years of experience in this field. And they had to agree that that is definitely a differentiator for us compared to homegrown or compared to open source. And will continue to be while we continue to innovate.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I want to invite our next speaker.
I have one small question for Maxime.
Okay.
Maxime, I like your slide with the Microsoft Power Automate cost versus ABBYY.
Yeah.
Did you guys made it, or where was the source of that? It was based on your research, or?
It was based on our research, yeah.
Okay.
So we're currently working on formalizing that a bit more. That was like a rough draft from internally that I was able to show on the slide. We're working on something that we can actually share publicly.
Okay, that's good.
To a certain extent. So, but yes, it's based on our own research. Yes.
Yeah, that would be very helpful because I'm on the proposal stage from my side. So.
Sure. Yep. No, definitely will do.